Thank you for joining us this evening. The regular scheduled council meeting of the Park City City Council, November 8, 2016 at 7 p.m. Daniela, would you call the roll?
John Leonard.
Here.
George Glover.
Here.
Gary Eldridge.
Here.
Melvin Kerr.
Here.
Tom Jones. George Capps.
Here.
Joel Pumphrey.
Here.
Jim Schrader.
Here.
Quorum is present, Your Honor.
Thank you. Tonight, Pastor Larry Tweet is going to lead in the invocation, and Councilman Pumphrey is going to lead in the pledge. If everybody please stand.
Our Father in heaven, we give thanks tonight, Lord, for the goodness of God in the land of the living. Lord, that your hand has been upon us and you've guided us. Lord, we thank you for the election that has just occurred, and we pray that those who come out successful in their desire for public service will be blessed with wisdom and be able to make honorable decisions and lead the nation in the way it should go. Father, we put our trust in you, for in Jesus alone is there hope of eternal life and of success that comes from living for the living God. Father, now bless the purpose of this meeting tonight and each one who participates. Let it come forth with great joy. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. The next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. We need to make a change this evening. Item I, we need to remove from the agenda. Tom, you're okay with that?
Yes, we need to make another change too. On F, item 4 in the consent agenda, we need to take second half out of that.
Okay. And John?
I'm sorry.
I would,
Okay, sorry.
It was F4?
Yeah, item F, item 4, where it says remit, second half, where it just says remit to Hartman Raymond.
it's a typo, I believe.
Okay.
Did you want to second it?
Second, yeah.
Okay. We've got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes 8-0. We don't have anything for awards or presentations, and nobody has signed up for public forum this evening, so we'll start with our staff reports with our city administrator, Jack Whitson. Jack?
Well, I know I did a lot in the last 2 weeks, but to be honest with you, I can't pinpoint a darn thing. I worked on a lot of things with Rick and his crews, primarily City Hall's moving ahead. Real good. We'll be meeting here shortly to go over with the design engineer on the security system, phone system, and cable. And so hopefully we'll get that settled and out for bid so we kind of know what that's going to be looking at. But basically that's all I have to report unless anybody has any specific questions.
Melvin?
How much longer do we have on the 53rd Street project?
Probably 2 years. No, you're talking about the one phase, right?
Right.
Oh, okay. That's probably going to be around April, May of next year.
Well, 2 years they ought to start owing this thing, right? We don't need to bond this.
Well, talk to the state about that.
Okay.
Even though it's our project, the state controls that. They're going to be starting Broadway in March, around March 15th. And that will probably take about 6 months to complete. And so that's why I said about 2 years.
Have we got all the utilities moved and all that, or?
Yeah, on Broadway,
We got the-
we're in good shape.
Okay.
We got to deal with a situation with Guyos moved in there and wasn't told that we were going to mess with the intersection. So we're going to be working with the CCUA to try to help them out a little bit. May need to come to you and see if we can donate a few millings to add a little parking to the back of the building for them. So they have some parking, because the way this thing is going to be structured, it's going to close off one side of their building each time. They always have one open, but they don't have a lot of parking anyway. And so, with your permission, we're supposed to get some free millings. We might take a load or two over there, let them spread it, but give it to them to kind of help them on their parking. And we might even purchase a few signs to direct people where to park, to kind of help them out. I really feel sorry for them, but the owner did not advise them at the time they rented the place that there was going to be a big intersection improvement. So we want to try to keep them there. A lot of people go there and eat, and
Sure.
so we may have to help them out a little bit.
Thanks.
Okay, George?
Well, that new city hall, that's coming along on schedule, is it?
It's coming along pretty good. It's going to slide over to May. Originally, they thought maybe April, but I think it's going to slide a little bit over to May because of all the rain we had.
Okay. We're going along on budget, no change orders or anything?
Well, there might be one in our favor, but so
Well, that's
far-
good.
Yeah, yeah. So there may be one in our favor. Not much, but maybe one. So
Okay, thank you.
So just to touch on a few things on the City Hall while standing in line to vote today. I got some positive feedback, and a couple of citizens actually wanted to make sure that we were going to have an open house because they would love to come see the building when we get it going, and I promised her that a couple of them that wouldn't happen. The other thing I wanted to touch up on real quick is new home permits that were issued. In 2013, we only issued 14 new home permits. In 2014, we did 28. 2015, we came back at 32. And as of the end of October, we're at 31. So we are set to continue beating the previous years. So I think that's pretty good. And we've seen with us be able to get rid of the property that we own, now only invested in Bear Hill, that starting to see the housing market move again. So that's exciting to hear. Next, we'll hear from Rick Norman, our Director of Public Works. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Public Works report for this evening, November 8th, 2016. In our Park Department, most of the last couple of weeks we've been spent on setting blocks at the BMX track. I think we'd set 31 of those at the in front of the bleachers on the west side of the track. We've also got that area backfilled in. Contractor was supposed to come out today and start setting a fence up on that. I believe they got the posts set. Also set up the barricades for the toy run. This was actually 2 members of the Park Department and 2 members of the Street Department. We got those set up. I understand it was a relatively long event and for a good cause. Street Department, we did extend the valley gutter at the intersection of Wendell and Fairchild. Water is normally running through that intersection, and we now have that in concrete, so we expect that to hold up. The asphalt just simply wouldn't hold up under existing conditions. Last 2 weeks, we have been doing street patching. We've had a total of 324 square feet. The year-to-date total is 3,684 feet. We've also started working on a concrete flume on Ventnor and Grove. Starts at the discharge pipe on Ventnor runs to Grove Street. We've been working on this for the most of a month. Not entirely that, but quite a bit on that. And we had a dry period and we went for it. We've got most of the flume done, but we still have to put the sidewalk across that. That will, we expect that to happen later this week or the first part of next week. And in the Water and Sewer Department, the average work orders per day for October was 34. Be glad to try to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Rick? Not seeing any. Thank you, Rick. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion? George?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
And Tom?
Second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes 8-0. The next item on the agenda, under new business, item A, which is consider a resolution authorizing the offering for sale of general obligation bonds of the City of Park City, Kansas, in the amount of $7,153,377.27 for improvements to the 53rd Street North and Broadway intersection and water, streets, and sanitary sewer improvements to the Prairie Hills Second Edition. John Haas?
Good evening. John Haas with Ramsey Financial Consultants. So maybe some stuff on the screen, but if not, we have backup.
Thanks, sir.
What we have up on the screen in Table 1 of the documents that I handed out tonight, we're looking at two options for your consideration for financing Prairie Hills Edition and 53rd Street. Project cost, bond cost, total bond issue of $2,260,000 for option A, which is without capitalized interest. On that, if we can go to the next slide, which would be Table 4. If you look at Table 4, you can't see it very brightly. But under fiscal 2018, we're looking at a possible mill levy of 10.41 mils, which I think Danielle was telling me that that's kind of what had been in the past, but we were trying to bring that down. In fact, in all the forecasting that we had done previously, that was around 9.5 mils. So what had happened was that bond counsel advised us that we needed to finance the Prairie Hills Edition in fiscal 2017 because of some tax code issue. I can't explain it. That's just what we were told to do. So what had happened, instead of paying interest on these bonds in 2017, that interest, all that interest was pushed into 2018. So that caused the mill levy to go to 10.41 mils forecasted. Now if we could go to Table 5. Okay. What option we're talking about is under option B, is that if we throw $55,000 of capitalized interest in that to help defer the cost, additional cost, is in 2018, and if you go to Table 8, you can see that that brings the mill levy down to 9.55 mils. But the question he always asks me, which is always appropriate, how much does that cost us? Well, if you look down at the bottom of Table 8, you can't see it on this one, but in the bottom of Table 8, the additional interest cost on the $55,000 would be $8,750. and the additional mill levy would be 0.15 of a mill. So I don't have a recommendation. It's up to you guys. I don't know if staff has a recommendation, but these are the two options, is to add $55,000 of capitalized interest or go without it, and knowing that you'll have a bump in the mill levy about 3/4 of a mil from what we had originally forecast. The resolution before you is calling for a sale of the bonds for both projects. Sale date will be December 13th, which is about the last day of the year that we sell bonds. You get into the following year, it's just, people are too distracted with the holidays. Any questions or comments?
Tom?
Yeah, I have one, and maybe I missed it in the presentation, but we got 53rd and Broadway and 53rd and I-135 projects, hydraulic, that are city projects.
Right.
And then we have Prairie Hills as a private project. Why
Right.
are they combined?
To save you money.
Okay, but Prairie Hills is not part of what you're talking about being a mill levy value.
That is correct.
Okay, because I wanted
That
to make
is
sure
correct.
that was
Mhm.
not in it. Okay.
Well, one of the things, if you guys remember back when we were doing the mill levy forecasting, we assumed a 25% delinquency rate. Not saying that Prairie Hills would cause that, but we didn't change any of those assumptions. So that would affect it that little tiny bit. But it's so small, if you look at Table 2, the amortization schedule for Prairie Hills is only $30,000 a year. So it's not going to, that's barely a bump on your total debt service, because your total debt service is around $2 million.
So what you're presenting this to us is as if we were going to have to come up with a mill levy to pay for all this versus it being incorporated into savings and some other things. And I'm pushing that back at staff. I mean, I'm confused.
Okay, the forecasted mill levy, when we started all these projects for 2018,
Right?
was 9.5 mils.
Okay.
And now, I have to go back and look. It's 10.41 mils. But on the other hand, in 2017, we had forecasted a mill levy with all these projects as 9.5. And you only really needed to do was 7.5 mils. So, but what people remember is what the mill levy you do now, I mean, in the future rather than you did in the past.
And I understand that, and what you're doing is presenting to us what it will be if it's status quo as it's being presented tonight, without
Right.
any offsets with other values that may be going on in the city budget. This is standalone.
It's standalone in the sense that when we forecasted the mill levy, we took into consideration funds coming from other sources
Okay.
and from properties coming off the property tax abatement. If it was just a pure mill levy with no other support from other sources, it would be materially higher. What that is, I'd have to go back and calculate.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay. But state statute allows us to do different projects, under one bond issue. And if you look at tables 2 and 3, for budgeting purposes, they'll be segregated for that purpose, but it's done as one bond issued to save funds and make it more attractive to investors.
Okay.
And Tom, I hope I answered your question. That was,
Somewhat.
well, we're
I
trying.
think, I understand what you've done here. I'm not sure that I either don't remember or I've forgotten or need to refresh my memory on how we applied it to future budgets.
Okay.
And that's not what you're here for tonight.
Okay,
so.
well, what we were trying to do, if you go back to table 4, was create a forecasted mill levy impact, like is described there. And in fact, it's a little bit lower. It was just having to delay it to 2018 that caused this little bump in 18. Otherwise, everything is less than what we'd forecasted back in 16.
Okay.
And like I said, when people said that the state cut its budget, then or cut income taxes than raised them. I don't remember when they cut taxes, I just remember when they raised them, and I know that's what you guys go through.
Okay.
And that's why we wanted to bring up the 55,000 in capitalized interest, because we had set a goal in 18, and we'll forecast and meet those goals. But 18, because we're not paying any interest in 17, it's all pushed into 18. And that's why it's a little bit higher than what we had forecasted.
Okay.
Okay. Jack?
Actually, Tom, if you go back to our 2014, 2013 budget, we were around 9 or 10 mils there for the debt service. Reason why it was dropped in 15, the then city clerk had pulled 200,000 from the debt service into the general fund to supplement it. So that showed that it was less. But in 2015, what I did, because of the tax lid purposes, I decreased the mill levy in the bond fund and increased the mill levy in the general fund. We still had the same overall mill levy, but that was to protect us against the tax lid.
Okay.
Now, in 2017, we've reversed that back. So hopefully it'll be okay. But if you remember right, when we looked at John brought these spreadsheets, we gained against the debt service by way of IRBs coming off the deal. Also, we saved something like 400,000 in
On the
interest
refund.
over
Yeah.
the big scope of things, and so that's playing a play in here. It gives us, let's say, several years down the line, and when we do the bridge, we're probably going to have to bond $1 million or so. Then our mill levy and the debt service is going to be less. Now, we use 25% in our to be very conservative on funds that we think people are not going to pay. I think we're going to be better than that, because we just got through paying off all the specials in Saddlebrook, a big hunk of it out of Prairie Hills, and that was factored into that 25% when the developers had it. So we think that's going to improve, but we're trying to be very conservative so that we're not painting a picture any better than what the worst situation.
There's opportunities out there for these 10 mills is what I'm driving at. And I understand that this package drives, or the net effect is 9.5 or 10 mills, but we've got other vehicles within the city that we can go look at as we budget this in out years, is what I'm looking at.
Yes.
Okay, I just didn't want this to come out that we were going to be raising it 10 mills because of a road project.
No.
No.
This
And
is
that's
It's
within
been,
our compass of
traditionally,
where
it's
we're
But
at.
that's what people hear when they watch it on TV.
Yeah.
So,
You know, prior to 15, 14,
right.
it was around this mill levy area anyway.
Okay. And then I realize that you combine Prairie Hills with this for the benefit of getting a better value on when you let it for interest rate, I mean, for example. But and that kind of was confusing when they were tied together, because I know one of them is totally separate of the others.
Right.
And just wanted to make sure that was what we were looking at.
Yeah, I wanted to give you the whole package, those whole 8 tables, so you can see how you take things apart, then you put them back together. Then after we sell the bonds, then we'll take them back apart again.
And that's what I wanted to make sure we were doing, so, okay.
Yeah, the landowner will be making his special payments for
Right.
this phase into the city. So it won't be a big conglomerate of things that you have to kind of figure out where it comes from, so.
Okay. I'm
But
good.
we knew that we'd worked really hard in showing you guys just forecast of mill levies, and I thought you might want to know, once we do this, how that would look. Again, other than 18, everything is actually lower than what we'd forecasted before.
Okay.
Interest rates continue to be down, and we did those refinancings and such.
Thank you.
Danielle?
I also wanted to mention to Tom that the Prairie Hills, those special assessments are amortized over a 15-year term, and our notes, I think, are over a 20-year.
Right.
So we're keeping that separate also. And I don't know if you care to hear the staff recommendation, but what Jack I think agrees with me, is that we capitalize interest, keep the mill levy lower in 18, so we're not having to make up that difference.
Okay.
So that's what we had suggested.
Okay, thank you.
And it's a good value at only having the $8,700 difference to try to maintain that normalization within that.
Yeah, basically what it does is in 20, 21, and 22 raises the mill levy just a little bit more than without it, is where it comes into play.
Okay. Is there any more discussion? Is there a motion? Jim?
I move that we approve the resolution as laid before us.
Did you want to do option A or option B with doing the 55,000 in the capital interest?
It was
Option
the
B.
staff recommendation. What was that
Option
was
B
B.
includes the 55,000.
Option B.
Okay.
I apologize if I could interject. Once we get bids, that 55,000 may change, might go up a little bit, may go down, but you'll get to decide that again on December 13th, how you might want to change that or not. But you would like to capitalize some interest to keep the mill levy level forecast, is what I'm getting from the board.
Okay.
Is there a second? Gary?
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. Daniela, would you call the roll?
John Leonard.
Aye.
Yes. George Wilbur.
Aye.
Gary Eldred.
Aye.
Melvin Kerr.
Aye.
Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Katz.
Aye.
Bill Humphrey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye.
Okay, and that passes 8-0.
All right, thank you, everyone. See you next month. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Mr. Haas.
That is resolution 940-2016.
Okay. Brings us to our next item on the agenda, item B, which is consider the commitment of city funds for Phase 2 of the 53rd Street North improvements, state project number 87N-0606-02 at $899,478.67. Jack?
I want to clarify that the $899,478.67 is not city funds. What we're doing is asking the state to accept the bid for $899,478.67 and for our commitment of our share of $220,000.
Okay.
And this
Tom?
is for 53rd and Broadway intersection.
Okay, Tom?
I would make a motion that we approve this recommendation, and the city's portion of it being approximately $220,000.
Okay. George?
I'll second that.
Go ahead.
I'd like to also make a comment before we vote on it, that for the public, this is turn lanes, new signaling, and a little bit of widening and other things on all four corners at 53rd and Broadway. And today, I'm agreeing with Melvin, the brick show, so we need to do something.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 8-0. That brings us to item C, which is consider an ordinance amending section 13-107 of the municipal code of the city pertaining to permit fees for construction of sidewalks, curbs, gutters, and driveway approaches, and repealing the original of said section 13-107. Doug?
Mayor and council, this is an amendment to the fees. You can see from the delineated copy that you have in your package that we used to set out different cents per lineal foot charges. Those generally generated for curb and gutter work and driveway approach work kind of $5 to $12. And that really wasn't covering our costs in administering that. And so the suggestion was that we do away with that and go to a flat fee of $30 per permit, and that's what this ordinance does.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Doug? Just this is something that hasn't been touched in a very long time, and it would really streamline some operations with just going with the set fee. Gary?
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance as amended.
And Melvin?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. Danielle, would you call the roll?
John Leonard.
Aye.
George Glover.
Aye.
Gary Eldred.
Aye.
Melvin Kerr.
Aye.
Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Aye.
Joel Pumphrey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye.
And that passes 8-0.
Ordinance 1006-2016.
And Doug, do you have a comment?
No.
Okay. All right, that brings us to our next item on the agenda, item D, which is consider an ordinance amending sections 4-403 and 4-404 of the municipal code of the city pertaining to permit fees for mechanical work performed by mechanical contractors and repealing of original said sections 4-403 and 4-404. Bob?
Okay, I'm Bob Walker, building official of Park City. Thank you, council and mayor. This ordinance is we're trying to bring in line the mechanical permits fees that are charged or on the on mechanical for commercial, which is the lion's share of this work, and also it would bring us where we are at the same level of fees for the surrounding municipalities. So we're also at the same time we're making the tables a little more up to date and easier to to understand. Basically, they had not been there again. They've laid there quite a few years.
Okay.
As far as 1 and 2 family new structures for residential, it does not affect those whatsoever. Okay.
Does anybody have any questions for Bob? Is there a recommendation from the council? Gary, I heard you.
Make a motion that we approve this ordinance as amended.
I think I heard Jim.
Yeah, it's not working.
Not
out.
working
I second
again.
that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. John, did you have a comment?
No, I was going to say.
Just going off a hearing now. So. All those in, or I'm sorry, not seeing any further discussion. Danielle, would you call the roll?
John Leonard.
Aye.
George Glover.
Aye.
Gary Eldred.
Aye.
Melvin Kerr.
Aye.
Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Aye.
Joel Pumphrey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye.
All right, and that motion passes 8-0.
That's ordinance 1007-2016.
And that brings us to item E, which is consider an ordinance amending sections 4-205 and 4-206 of the municipal code of the city pertaining to permit fees for electrical performed by licensed electrical contractors and repealing the originals of said sections 4-205 and 4-206. Bob?
Yeah, there again, this ordinance brings in where we will be in line with the municipalities around us. It would be approximately the same fees that they are charging now for the electrical type of inspections. This would not affect, again, 1 and 2 single families. That would not affect their fee basis at all. One thing that would make a little raise would be like if they went in and updated electrical service on a single family, that would be a slight raise in that fee.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Bob? Tom?
I'll make a motion, we approve the ordinance as presented.
Is there a second? George?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. Danielle, would you call the roll?
John Leonard.
Aye.
George Glover.
Aye.
Gary Eldred.
Aye.
Melvin Kerr.
Aye.
Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Aye.
Joel Pumphrey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye.
And that passes 8-0.
That is ordinance 1008-2016.
Okay, thank you. And that brings us to item F, which is consider an ordinance amending ordinance number 749-206 of the City of Park City, Kansas pertaining to court costs and fees to be assessed to the municipal court of the city through setting guidelines regarding the expenditure of certain funds that are collected through court costs and fees and repealing the original of said ordinance number 749-2006. Doug?
Mayor and council, this is the follow-up to the discussion that we had at the last meeting where Dana and David presented to you the need to bring some of our court costs and fees up to match other surrounding communities and to cover some of the costs that we incur. And that's what this does. This is exactly in line with the presentation that you saw at the last meeting.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Is there a motion? Jim
I move that we approve this as proposed.
and John?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. Danielle, would you call the roll?
John Leonard.
Aye.
George Glover.
Aye.
Gary Eldridge.
Aye.
Melvin Kerr.
Aye.
Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Nay.
Bill Pumphrey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye.
And that passes 7-1.
Ordinance 1009-2016.
And that brings us to item G, which is consider an ordinance repealing ordinance number 707-2005 of the city relating to the failure to appear in municipal court. Doug?
Mayor and council, this is kind of part and parcel of the last one. The presentation last week was that we were going to do away with a separate violation for failing to appear in court when you're scheduled to. And so in order to do that, we need to repeal the ordinance that makes that a violation. That sort of thing now is covered by the issuance of a letter, and we've charged in the new fees $5 for that letter, or letting somebody know if it's a traffic infraction. If it's a misdemeanor and they don't show up, we issue a warrant. There is no additional charge, but a $50 fee for warrant. So we're covering that, and we think in a better way. And it kind of in line with the Department of Justice and what they focused on municipal courts. Failed to appear charges kind of made things worse for people, and so the thought was just to do away with that. And that's what this ordinance does.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions, or is there a motion? John?
Motion to approve.
Jim?
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. Danielle, would you call the roll?
John Leonard.
Aye.
George Glover.
Aye.
Gary Eldridge.
Aye.
Melvin Kerr.
Aye.
Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Nay.
Jill Pumphrey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye.
And that motion passes 7-1.
Ordinance 1010-2016.
201.
Okay. And that brings us to item H, which is consider the police department surplus property. Chief Boston?
Mr. Mayor, council members, over the last several months, and mainly in preparation for moving to a new facility, I've asked some of our officers to do an inventory of our property, and they've gone through a lot of surplus property, both here at City Hall and in the basement here and at our squad room at 53rd and Broadway. And we've come up with a list of surplus property that we're not going to use. These are items that are either obsolete or we don't use them anymore. What I would like to ask is for your permission to sell these at auction on Purple Wave, and to be able to place the funds from that into the Police Capital Equipment Fund. I appreciate the fact you've done similar things in the past. It's helped offset the money that we have to come and ask you for to pay for equipment for police vehicles and things of that nature. So I would ask for your permission to do that, and there should be a list included in your packet there. There were a couple of items I wanted to point out towards the bottom of the list there. There's a tailgate and a rear bumper for this is for the code enforcement pickup that we just bought. We had to put a Tommy lift on there, which we had on our other vehicle before, because the animals are too heavy for them to lift into the back end. And so we've got a bumper and a tailgate brand new that we can't use, and they would probably sit forever somewhere in storage. So brand new tailgate and bumper is probably worth a fair amount of money. So I think in my opinion, it would be good to be able to sell that at auction and get rid of it now while it's worth something. So I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Does anybody have any questions for the chief? I think this is an excellent idea, what you did, going through and trying to figure out, one, how we can streamline space and try to put some more funds to better use than sitting around. George?
I'll make a motion, we give Chief permission to do what he asked.
John?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 8-0. Thanks, Chief.
Mr. Mayor?
Next item on the agenda is item J, after we removed item I, and that's discuss possible modifications to the regulations restricting parking and use of recreational vehicles on city streets and private property. Doug?
Mayor and council, this is a discussion item. I've discussed this with other staff and the mayor, and the city has a kind of a specific regulation in its local traffic regulations outside the standard traffic ordinance that we adopt, provided by the League of Municipalities, that restricts bus parking within the city. For buses, the rule is generally that there are a couple of very limited streets that are allowed where bus parking is allowed, and then for bus drivers that live in the city, they're allowed to have the bus parked on the street during days that school's in session from
8 to
o'clock
3.
to 3 o'clock, so that they can come and go and do their work. There have been some issues in the past, and there have been some issues, I think, in neighboring cities, and we're concerned about kind of getting a handle on what the council thinks we should and could do to regulate the parking on city streets of recreational vehicles. So it's a matter for your discussion. We certainly could pattern something after the buses. In this case, I guess it would be that they are just not permitted to be parked on the city streets, with an exception, which we discussed, for people who wanted to bring their RV from storage in preparation for a trip in the summertime, and they would park it on the street for a period of maybe up to 3 days, and preparing it, loading it up, getting it getting it ready to go on a trip. So our thought was we might do that with some sort of a permit. I'm not even sure, we discussed whether that would be a charge for it, but at least a control where somebody could come into City Hall and say, I'm going to bring mine in and park it on Beaumont Street for a period of 48 hours from the June 10th to June 11th. And then we have that record so that the police department and code enforcement knows that that's a valid parking. But generally, overall, RVs would be prohibited from parking on city streets.
Yeah, so this was something I kind of brought to Doug and asked him to look at, and then we found the ordinance that pertains to bus parking is really just, people are allowed to put them on the setback of their house and their property on a paved or surfaces area in their property, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when people leave them out in the streets, that some of the streets are very narrow in town, and it does cause problems for people to navigate around those. We do get complaints where somebody has an RV or something that's parked out there. And here recently, we've even had a couple of areas where there's been fifth wheels parked and disconnected with slides out where people are staying in the RV in the street. And we just want to, I think we need to eliminate that. Doug, can you touch on the conflict that we have with the staying in the RV?
Yes. Well, the mayor made a comment about RVs in the street and people staying in them in the street when they're parked in the street. That's not a parking issue. We presently have an ordinance that prohibits that. The problem is it also generally prohibits it anywhere in the city. We have an ordinance on the books that prohibits somebody from occupying a recreational vehicle in the city limits other than in an RV campground. Well, at the present time, that's in conflict with some of our zoning regulations, and some of you may have been on the bench when we had that discussion last and passed some regulations that permitted, I think, up to 15 days, if there's not any continuous use beyond 15 days, permitted that as an accessory use in residential areas. So that's a conflict. And we need to make some determination of well, you need to make a determination and direct me which way to go on how to handle that.
And really, I think the best bet is just to not allow that. One, nobody can regulate when 15 days is. I mean, nobody's going to sit out and track when that is or what's going on. But also, you know, if you have an RV or recreational vehicle that's parked in the setback and your kids want to do an overnight in the camper or something, nobody's worried about that. It's more somebody bringing in and setting up and living in an RV on the property, of that being any type of problem or maybe a nuisance for another neighbor. So one, I don't think we can even enforce 15 days. I mean, you have to sit on it, and really, I think we need to eliminate the RVs in the street just for congestion purposes. Park it on your property, put it in the setback, but I also don't want people that have their RVs sitting in a shelter that they're paying for. They need to be able to have the flexibility to bring them home and pack them. And I think we should do a permit, a free permit for 72 hours where somebody could contact us, let us know. And to me, that's where the catch is. If it's sitting out there and they didn't notify us, then they're in violation. If they notified us, said, hey, we're going to be out here, we got to pack up, we're going on a trip, no problem. It's just how can we keep that from people storing those? And we've gotten complaints before on a particular RV that's a motorhome that sits out in the street around Grove, and people can't see around the corner, and then they back it up a little bit, and then it's sitting in the driveway. I just think we need to look into getting rid of that. So I'd like to hear you guys' discussion. Tom?
Well, the last one you just brought up, we made no parking on one side of about a half a mile of street, so that wouldn't happen, and it hasn't fixed it. But it's made a major inconvenience for anybody that wants to use a park. They have to park on the other side of the street and walk now. I'm going to be opposed to doing just one little piece of this tonight, because I've asked that we look at the whole thing and look at how many RVs you can have, where we can park them. I mean, there's a whole gamut of things we need to look at, and I've asked that we have a workshop and look at that, and it hasn't happened. So I look at this as just we're going to pay to go fix a little bitty piece of something that's broke, instead of looking at the whole thing. So
Well, I'm looking at this, and it
And
says
I understand where
discussion
you-
item.
I
So
understand where you're coming from
This
on it,
is
but
where
we
you
have,
should be
we need to look at,
addressing what you want to look at.
we need to look at the ordinance in total. And this is part of it, but it's not all of it. There's a big chunk out there that's being abused regularly in this city, and nobody's enforcing it. And so we either need to relax it or we need to fix it.
Okay, so you don't have any suggestions for this?
Not for this, you know, common sense says you don't park a camper on the street and sleep in it, because somebody run in the back end of it. I mean, that's a safety issue. And we should make a move. But I don't want to go take this one little piece of this ordinance and go work it, or try to work it tonight, and ignore the rest of it that we've been talking about all summer.
Okay. George?
Well, my question would be, how are you going to enforce that? If I pull my camper up in front of your house and park it, and it's going to be there for the weekend, who's going to stop me from sleeping in it? Who's even going to know? I mean, you're talking about putting something in the law that's unenforceable. How you going to know? You can't violate the person's, you know, we got a Fourth Amendment right here, you know. You can't just open somebody's door and look in it. How are you going to enforce it?
Well, that's kind of the concept, is you can't park on the street. So whether anybody's in there or not is irrelevant. If it's on the street, parked, if we were to adopt this ordinance, then you write them a ticket.
Okay, yeah. But I had my neighbor, her family used to come in, and they'd come in for the weekend. They've come in from Wisconsin or somewhere. Frankie was my neighbor before she passed away. And they would stay there in their camper over the weekend and stuff. And I don't know. I don't know. You know, we're not rulers of this city. We're supposed to serve this city, not rule it. And it just seems a little high-handed to me. I can understand the safety deal of not parking them on the street, but that's something.
Okay.
Just think of the people that travel around the United States and pull in to their families and spend a night or spend a weekend.
Nobody's trying to change that.
Well, if we ban parking on the street, we are.
Yeah. If you could put it in the driveway and the setback.
Yeah, I'd go for that.
Okay. Gary?
One of the concerns I have with it is, I mean, if we put this regulation or law in the books, there's going to be a lot of people, I think, that are not aware of it. And so, issuing them a ticket on their first violation, I'm kind of, wondering, how do we make this so visible that we can justify writing them a ticket on their first offense, if you get what I mean, without any warning. And I can see maybe a warning ticket, and something that says, okay, don't do that again, without doing the proper procedure. And the second offense, you're going to, have to pay some kind of fine. But that's kind of my feeling on it. We have to give it a little bit of leeway because it is something that's not commonplace, I guess. And there should be some way to let the citizen know that there is a regulation and this is what you need to do to follow it. So.
Okay. Tom?
I don't want to come across negative on this piece that you're talking about tonight, and there is some real issues there that need to be addressed, but we've got some other issues that need to be addressed along with it, and that's just where I'm coming from. So I just like to leave it at that. So.
All right. Jim?
Just for clarification, it seems like there ought to be some way for grandma and grandpa to be, that come for a weekend to stay with their kids or whatnot. I'm trying to think how they can stay in the RV for a short period of time. We were talking about if that may be okay if they're in the driveway, or define the setback line, the building setback line?
The setbacks past the back or the face of the house, where it needs to be, where they currently are supposed to be parked.
So they would physically have to be on the side of the house in the yard or something. It's not that they can park in the driveway. Yeah, I'm just asking for clarification. I'm not really forming an opinion yet. Okay, just I'm thinking about that.
Jack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Doug pointed out, there's a little conflict between zoning and the ordinance. Right now, under this was a big issue 3 or 4 years ago, and one of the major changes in the subdivision regulations, because of the problem with, I think we had over 250 RVs in our community against the zoning regulations, and so we tried to allow those that were in violation a grace period, and allow them a permit that they have to buy every year to stick on their vehicles until those vehicles are sold or discontinued use. In which case, then they can't bring them back to the city unless they park them in the setback. Right now, according to the zoning regulations, you can park a vehicle in the street for 48 hours in order to load it up and remove stuff to go on a camping trip. And one of the problems with that is how do you know when 48 hours occurs? That's a big problem with that. We often thought, well, maybe when you see one, the code enforcement officer could go to them and give them a 48-hour permit. They have a record of it, what time they parked it there, and 48 hours come back, it's still there, they get a ticket. Nothing was ever done with that. Now, as far as mom and pop visiting and stuff, they recognize that that is important to people, and so they can pull the RV into their driveway, and they can stay up to 15 days, okay? Here again, the problem is, how does code enforcement know they've been there 15 days or 20 days? It's very difficult to enforce, like George brings out. You know, here again, a code enforcement officer come in and say, well, you need a permit to do this. And then that would gauge the time frame there. But that's extra work for code enforcement people. But anyway, that's what the current regulations in the zoning is. 48 hours in the street. You can have up to 15 days visitor living in the RV in your driveway. It must be in your driveway. Must be in a residential area, okay? Any other RV must be behind the face of your house, which is the setback line. It must be on some kind of hard weather surface. It can't be on the grass. If it goes into your backyard, you have to build a driveway to your backyard to park it. But you can if you want to, but you have to have a surface there so you're not rutting the yard up and you're not allowing weeds to grow up underneath it that would allow rats and other creatures like snakes and stuff to congregate underneath the vehicle. So that's kind of a little short synopsis of the zoning regulations currently.
Gary?
Just a point of clarification, you know, we were talking initially about the ability to park an RV in a driveway. And does that include any portion of the driveway, or does it have to be behind the frontage of the house?
Now, if it's a visitor, for the 15 days, it can be in the driveway.
Okay.
If it's a permanent situation where somebody's storing it on their property, it must be behind the face of the house.
Okay.
Also, we did make another exception, pop-up trailers. Now, courts have nabbed cities, I guess, at least the information I've heard, about saying, well, they look ugly, and that's why you regulate. You can't do that. We're regulating because of the sight of people trying to pull out of their driveways and can't see. And so we said, okay, a lot of people own these little trailers to haul plywood every now and then. There's a lot of those in town. Those can be in the front of the house. Pop-up trailers, RVs can be there as long as they're not over 5'6" inches tall. That's so an average person can walk out and look over them and see if there's anything that might obstruct them pulling out of their yard.
Right.
All right.
So basically,
And you can't dolly down a trailer on a street
right.
without it hooked to a vehicle.
So is there something we could do then to bring all these residential RV things together? Maybe what Tom's basically asking for, I think, here is the review of all the RV residential things and bring them together and then go over the whole packet, if you will, and take a look at everything that pertains to residential and RVs.
Another problem coming up here is people having more than one RV, letting their buddies park their RV on their property. So in some cases, might get more than just one RV. Might get 2 or 3 if your lot's big enough. And that's becoming a little bit of a sore thorn in the side of some people of having their friends either renting space out or letting their friends park them there or whatever. And that may need to be addressed because currently it isn't addressed.
Well, I guess that kind of just reinforces the point that we probably need to take a look at all of the ordinances that have to do with RVs in residential areas and see if we can't do something to maybe combine and simplify the whole code so that it's a lot more clear and not ambiguous and being in conflict.
Sounds like a good idea, Gary. Melvin?
Well, I see a lot of problems there. Some of these lots aren't available to put your camper behind or beside your house because they're not wide enough. And then if mom and pop comes to visit too and they put their camper in the driveway, the homeowners' cars are usually going out in the street, so there's a look around too. I know we're trying to run a city, not a homeowners association too, so I hate to,
Are you good?
yeah, I'm good.
George?
Well, you know, I'm a big believer in the 14th Amendment, and I can see where we're going to get crossways with that, big time. And besides that, if we want to look at codes, I think we need to have a workshop and look at all of our codes, because I could come in here with a couple of hundred violations just from walking the streets tomorrow. And if we're going to enforce the codes, then let's enforce them. If we're not, then let's don't. But we need to treat everybody the same under the law. We need to treat everybody the same, not just pick out a certain group that we're going to enforce the codes on, because there's some pretty good code violations. That people have been given variances, and there's violations there. I can bring you a whole troublesheet of them. But if we're going to have a workshop, then let's have a workshop and let's talk about codes. But let's don't just single one group out. Let's do all of them.
Tom?
I'd like to say that in reference to what you've brought tonight in our discussion item, that there are some streets in the city that aren't conducive to having an RV parked on them. Because if you have an RV on one side of the street and a car parked on the other side of the street, poor visibility for the cars that can get through there. So there's a lot of things we need to look at on issues like that. Now, some of the streets where we've got parking on one side, not on the other side, it's probably not an issue, but think of some streets over in Ward 2 that are pretty difficult to get through with just a truck on both sides. I can't imagine an RV sitting there, so.
All right, I'll look at something and come back with a different idea for you guys to look at. So we'll move on to governing body remarks, and we'll start with Jim.
I have no comments tonight.
George?
No.
Tom?
Speaking of ordinances, I noticed I was reading today that Wichita is looking at passing a ordinance identifying multiple sites that are constantly getting phone calls to either have police respond or compliance respond. And they're looking at identifying an address or a complex or a business facility, issuing tickets for multiple responses, so that's probably in the future. Positive note, I'd like to commend Madison on what she's doing. Everything's positive over there. You hear good things. Just like to tell her, keep up the good work. I'm talking about Senior Center, so.
Melvin?
I was able to go to the open house at the Central State Thermal King. That's quite a building they've got up there. It's really nice. A lot of positive going on up that area. Went to the 81 Speedway to the first annual Park City Chisholm Trail Shootout. That was had a packed grandstand. I think there was 6 different drivers from 6 different states represented there, and had a good time. That was pretty impressive.
Cool.
I have nothing this evening.
George?
I don't have anything.
John? I just want to say before we adjourn, I received a letter addressed to the mayor and the council, so I'll leave that here for council members to look over and read as well. Is there a motion? Tom? Sorry.
So moved. Make a motion, we adjourn.
John? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes 8-0.